Today is Sunday, Parashat Devarim. This parasha actually opens the fifth book in the Chumash. We concluded last Shabbat, Sefer B'Midbar, and now we're starting the book of Devarim. This parasha is always read on the Shabbat before Tisha Beav, and this year is no exception. Actually, it's going to be read on the day of the 9th of Av, which will be Shabbat, and the fast is postponed to the 10th of Av, which will be on Sunday. And why is this parasha read always before Tisha B'Av? Because it has a connection to Tisha B'Av in more than one way. Number one, in this parasha, the Torah tells us about the sin of the Meraglim, the spies who went to Eretz Canaan and came back and gave a negative report and caused the Jewish people to cry. That date, that night that they cried, was the night of Tisha B'Av. And they cried in vain, and they were told, you cried in vain on that night, and in the future, at that point, would have been in the future, which would be at the time of the destruction of the first and second temple, both were destroyed on the night of Tisha B'Av, because they believed Lashon Hara, they believed the evil speech that was said to them, that got them prejudiced about the land of Israel. And that cry in vain turned into something that was a problem not just for that night, but also for generations thereafter, when this period of the 9 days and the 9th of Av has been a date in our history, in Jewish history, where calamities happened. The first, second temple, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, and other difficulties that encountered throughout history. So that episode is mentioned here in the parasha of this week. Also in the parasha of this week, we find the word Echa. Echa, which means how is it? And Echa reminds us of Megillat Echa, the scroll of Echa, the scroll of Lamentations, that we read on the night and on the morning of Tisha B'Av. Well, the word Echa appears in the parasha of this week also, when Moshe Rabbeinu says, Echa esa masa'achem v'torhachem v'rivchem. When Moshe Rabbeinu says, how can I carry the load of all your fighting and your arguing? And the commentators explain that every person wanted to prove his point at any cost, and if he lost a court case, he would bring other attorneys to prove that his cause is more justified. And there was a lot of being very strict with one another and not forgiving to one another. That type of atmosphere and that type of sin is the atmosphere and the quality of the relationship between people at the time of the destruction of the temple, that sinat chinam, that hatred in vain that caused the destruction of the temple. So these are just two of the connections why is it always read before the fast of Tisha B'Av. At the beginning of the parasha, Ele Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu actually starts this fifth book in the Chumash, which will take him 5 weeks of discourse, of talking to Am Yisrael. He begins here on the 1st of Shvat, and he will conclude on the 7th of Adar, when he passes away. These 5 weeks is the book of Devarim that he will be speaking to Am Yisrael. He opens here in the first few psukim of this book with a rebuke to Am Yisrael. He mentions names of places where they went, but each name is actually a veiled rebuke of the way that Am Yisrael acted in those places. And he mentions them in a way that is somewhat not so obvious, in order not to embarrass them. And from this we learn a very, very important lesson, that when we need to rebuke someone, when we need to correct someone, when we need to educate or teach someone, a certain principle, something where he's at fault, we have to be very careful to do it in a way that is proper, not to embarrass him in public, not to hurt his feelings, in a way that what our purpose is for him to improve his ways. We should do it out of love, out of appreciation for him, not out of one-upmanship to prove him wrong and us right, but rather from a genuine interest to make him improve his ways. And that you're able to accomplish when you do it in a way that is careful not to hurt his feelings, not to embarrass him in public, to do it in a way that is soft. And then as you have that kind of rapport, that there is really genuine love and appreciation for the person and really a genuine interest to see him improve, then you can maybe at second step go into more details or find a diplomatic way or a wise way to get him to understand what he needs to understand so that he could correct his ways. And this is just one of the many lessons that can be learned from the parasha of this week. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.